final part of our Tableau project. So basically what we're going to do is we need to create a story. So if you remember, so basically these all are our analyses. So we have created a dashboard, and finally we need to tell a story about our analysis, about our visualizations, about our data set, okay? So that's the final part. The storytelling is the final part based on your analysis and data visualizations, okay? So how can you create a story? So let us build a story here. So as you can see here, okay, so there's a new story here. Just click over there, or alternatively you can come here and then you can create a new story, but this one is the easiest one. So let us rename this one as my company story, okay? Okay, my company is a sample company, just I have created my own, okay? So as you can see here, this is actually the name. So you can make it actually bold if you like, okay? And then center, let us make it center, and then let us make it Tableau bold maybe, okay? Okay, good. This is actually my company story, okay? So what we are going to do is, so we are going to create 3 sets of analysis. One is you need to introduce your story, and then the body of your story, and then you have to conclude it. Introduction, body, and conclusion, okay? So what we are going to do is, okay, so let us say this one, you can call it this one as introduction, okay? Welcome letter. Okay, so the next part is you need to bring the profit and loss statement. Okay, let us rename this one as the profit and loss statement, and then let us bring, so basically let us create two blank stories. So let us rename this one as introduction, change this one as the main analysis. This one is actually related to profit and loss. We'll edit it later. But this one, after you create a two blank stories. So let us rename this one as introduction. Okay, let us rename this one as conclusion. Okay, so under introduction, let us bring a text. Okay, so this will be introduction. So let us bring this one to here. Okay, so this one will be actually smaller size, not bold. Okay, so this project, okay, contains this visualization, this analysis, this kind of analysis. So you need to introduce your project, okay? The objective of your analysis, your whole analysis, and then you have to give me at least two major findings based on your analysis, okay? And then just give me a little bit of story about your general findings, okay? So that's actually just introduce your project here, okay? So after that, just click OK, and then you can maximize this one, okay? So yeah, so basically when you increase it, okay, like this one, okay? So you need to provide your introduction here, okay? I hope we make it bold, this one, right? Yeah, let us create this one Tableau bold, okay? Can you see? Yeah, let us create Tableau bold, okay? Now, let's make this one a little bit down. Okay, so you need to write your introduction here. And then this one is the conclusion. Again, bring this one, conclusion. And make it this one bold, okay? And then Tableau bold, let us make it Tableau bold. Okay, put it over there. And then, so let us say, for example, based on my analysis, okay, I conclude that, or you can just provide a conclusion about your total story, okay, about your analysis, your visualization, and your story. Just conclude this one, okay. Based on my analysis, I conclude that this, okay. So provide this kind of analysis over here, okay. So in other words, let us make it a little bit Okay, while you write your story, it will goes down, okay? So this is your conclusion, this is your introduction, right? So always introduction should come before, right? Introduction and then conclusion, introduction, conclusion, good. So let us create a story for our profit and loss statement. So I have already created a story for my income statement. So you can just copy this one, for example, for my case. So for example, let me copy paste this one. Okay. For your project, you can also create your own. Okay. So you can maximize it. Okay. Should not be too long technically, but it is fine. Okay. Okay, so let us make it a little bit larger, but technically should not be too large, okay? So make it like this. So as you can see here, for example, based on my income statement, okay, let us make it a little bit up. Okay, now it is good. Okay, so as you can see here, so what I did is actually my gross profit, my net sales, my net income, my gross profit, operating profit. So the profitability of the company is actually increasing over time, especially between 2025 and 2026, right? Oh, we need to edit this one. I forgot to edit it. So this one should be 2025, 26, okay? So even though other profitability items are increasing, like the gross profit, as you can see here, it increases over time, right? This one operating, it increases, but net income, it is the same, 1.3 million, 1.3 million. So as I have given here, based on my analysis, okay, even if other income items are actually increasing over time, but the net profit is not increasing, okay? It is stagnated basically, okay? It is stagnant. One reason could be, okay, as you can see from your income statement, for example, this one minus this one divided by this one, that means when you compute the year-over-year growth, percentage growth, basically for the cost of goods sold, the sales increased by 37%, but the cost of goods sold increased by 44%. And then operating expenses, you can just this one minus this one divided by this one. That means you need to compute the percentage growth, okay? So it is 58% is a huge amount, and then the taxation is 40%, okay? Now, even if our sales is actually increasing over time, but simultaneously, the expenses, like the cost of goods sold, the operating expenses, the taxations are increasing, but with an increasing rate, okay? That is why actually our net income is stagnant. So my recommendation is, okay, I recommend the company to control and optimize its expenses, especially if you go back to actually my working worksheet, just go back here. As you can see, if you check the operating expenses, actually the equipment and then the commissions are actually, the commission and the equipment expenses are dominating the operating expenses, right? So these are actually the larger expenses. If you check, for example, the others are lower, but the commissions and the equipments are larger, right? So as you can see here, okay, as per my working worksheet, operating expenses are actually dominated by operating expenses. And obviously you can bring also, if you like, you can bring the equipment expense, but as per my understanding, it would be very difficult to optimize the CapEx, which is a capital expenditure like the equipment expenditures, but commissions, okay, it is actually for the employees in the form of commission for the salesperson. So this one could be optimized, but this one may not be, okay? But if you think it can be optimized, you can add both commission and equipment in your story, okay? But as per my analysis, okay, even if other profitabilities are increasing, but the net income is stagnant. And the major reason is while the sales are increasing over time, but when you compute the percentage growth, the expenses like the cost of goods sold, operating expenses, and taxations are increasing with a higher rate. Okay. For example, the sales increased by 37%, but the operating expenses are increasing by 58%. So now my recommendation is optimizing the expenses. Okay. Especially the operating expenses increases from 2025 to 2026, right, by about 58%. So I need to focus on the operating expenses. And when I check my workings, actually majority of the operating expenses go to the commissions. So the commission should be optimized. That is actually my recommendations. Okay. So that is the first story. Okay, that's the first story. So the next story is, let us bring another story here. My KPI. Okay, KPI, let us bring it after this one. So this one is my KPI. So for my KPI, I again prepared a story here. Okay. So let us copy paste this one. So as I said here, all KPIs are actually growing over time. As you can see here, both the gross profit, operating profit, return on equity is increasing, but mostly the percentages are higher for gross profit and return on equity, on assets, right? But as you can see here, the operating profit margin is lower. It could be because the operating expenses are actually higher in 2026 relative to 2026. So this data is actually related to this story. This story and this story are actually interrelated, okay? So now the next one is about the KPI year-over-year change. So when you actually, let me just bring this one, okay? KPI year-over-year change. So just bring it after KPI. So just copy paste this one. So as you can see here, when you see the year-over-year KPI changes, so gross profit and operating profit margins, they are declining. They show actually negative growth, but return on asset is actually positive, okay? So this could be related to the previous story, okay? If you remember, so basically the costs are increasing over time, but the sales and the profitability are either stagnant or increasing with a slower rate. That could be one story which could explain this story, okay? So if you want, you can provide also more details here, okay? And the next story will be, let me see, the sales by country, okay? So let us copy paste this one. I prepare this one actually. For your project, I suggest you before you go to the Tableau, just prepare your story in a Word file and then you can copy paste it, okay? So the next one is sales by country. So let us bring this one here and then let us copy paste here. So as you can see here, the sales are dominated by the United States, right? With 5.3 million. And then the lower sales are actually 1.3 million in Canada, 1.3 million. This one's 5.3 million. Okay, the remaining are actually in between. So my suggestion is, okay, Canada and some others like the UK, they are underperforming. So in order to increase the sales in these markets, there should be some kinds of advertisements, right? Marketing, this kind of marketing approaches should be taken place. And another one is obviously the distribution and the sales channel should be updated and alternative approaches should be implemented by the company. This is my recommendation basically. Okay, so you can come up with your own story. And this is just my story. Okay, so after that you can also bring the tax by country. Okay, the tax by country. Okay, maybe before that you can just write your own story here. Just write your own story. Just before that, there's a profitability trend, right? Just bring the profitability trend here. Okay, so you can bring it here and then you can write your story here. Okay, so for example, as you can see here, the profitability, the operating profit of the company shows the lower operating profit in February 2026. The higher is actually in November 2026. So provide your own story over here, similar stories, okay? And you can connect one story with the other one. So as you can see here, we have created actually many stories, okay? So as I mentioned before, let us reduce this one. So as I said before, you can bring it down here if you like. So as I said before, start with introduction and then the main analysis, okay? As you can see here, the main analysis will come here, the main story, okay? And then you can provide your own story, okay? For example, the highest operating profit, okay, has been recorded in, is it November? here, yeah, November 2026. November 2026. While the highest operating profit has been recorded in November 2026, the lowest operating profit has been recorded in February 2026. Okay, so provide this kind of story and the justifications behind this one. Okay, why in the same year, why there is actually lowest and the highest sales? Okay, you have to tell your story behind this one if there is. Okay, if there is no justification, just provide, just link this story with this one or some other stories. Okay, so we provided actually our own story. Okay, so for the taxations, as you can see here, we paid more taxes to the US, but for example, since the sales are dominated by, let me just go back. Okay, for example here, no, so go back. Let me just see. Okay, yes. So the highest sale is in the US, right? Obviously, the more sale, the more taxation you are going to pay. It makes sense, right? So here, when it comes to this kind of analysis, first you tell me, okay, the company is actually paying higher taxes to the US and the Germany, right? So it makes sense because we have actually the highest sales in the US. So the more sale, and then the company need to pay more taxes because taxation is related to taxation is proportional to the sales. Okay, so you have to tell this kind of stories, not just only the highest sales in the US and Germany and the lowest sales, the lowest taxation is actually paid to the Canadian government, right? That is not deep. Okay, you need to go in deep. Okay, even if the company is paying the highest sale to the US and Germany and the lowest taxations to the Canadian and the UK government. But when you calculate, for example, tax divided by the sales, and then when you compute the proportion, the USA may be the lowest, right? So you have to tell me the story, even if we are paying higher taxes to the US government, but since there is actually a higher sales in the US government, it makes sense. So you have to tell me that kind of story. Anyway, after you told me that kind of story, finally you need to conclude your project is okay. Just conclude your project here. You will come here and then conclude your project. Okay. So you need to write your project here and then you need to save it. Okay. Yeah. By the way, if you want to provide some kinds of, let us say, for example, here, some kinds of analysis, you can bring, for example, a text here. And then, for example, if you want to show this one as this 5.3 million, 5.3 million, you can provide, for example, around here, the sales in the US is about 5.3 million. You can provide this one, but make sure that it makes sense and it doesn't make your graphs and your maps and your story boring, okay? Anyway, if you want to add, you can add here. Otherwise, you don't need to add if you want to provide some detailed information, okay? So this is how we create actual story, and this is all about our Tableau project, okay? So let me summarize. In Tableau, we analyze and visualize our data sets, okay? We start with the Excel data set, we import it into our Tableau, and then we visualize it actually using maps, using different kinds of graphs, okay? Using different kinds of calculation like this kind of computations, okay? And after that, we created a dashboard. And finally, based on our dashboard, we created a story. By the way, you can bring your dashboard here as well, okay? If you want to tell a story about your dashboard, you can bring it, okay? As you can see here, you will find it can you see this one? My dashboard, you can just bring it here if you like, okay? So we have analyzed and visualized our data set. We created a dashboard, the executive dashboard, and finally we tell our story, a story behind the data, a story behind the performance of the campaign. So this is all about Tableau, and it is a comprehensive project basically. I hope you'll enjoy it and you'll learn something from our discussion. So I'll see you next week. Okay, bye bye.